Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our Freeform Friday on our Geezerology channel. Bob is going to tell you about something unique today. This is something I had never heard of until Bob showed this to me in one of our Zoom meetings a week or so ago. But this is a book that was released in May of 2021, on May 4th in particular. It is called, the title is Morrison Hotel graphic novel. And this was written by somebody named Lee Moore, who has been writing comics since 2003, according to this publisher's blurb. And she wrote this in collaboration, quote, with the surviving members of the legendary rock band, The Doors, and drawn by artists from around the comic book world. Bob picked this up at some point, and he's read it, and he's looked at it, and he's going to tell us all about it. Bob.
Hey, Scotty. All righty. Thanks, Scotty. Thank you for that intro and setup. And welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us again and having the patience to come back and listen to me some more. So let's travel back, way back to high school. And when I got introduced to the Doors, and my mind and my consciousness got expanded, and I became a fanatic in the true sense of the word. And I sought out and absorbed everything that I could find about the Doors. I collected everything that I could find way back then, in the 1970s. I bought every album they had, even ones I didn't need. I bought 13, the Greatest Hits album. I bought Weird Scenes in the Gold Mine. Not because I needed those, because I had all those songs, but they were a Doors album and they were going to be on my shelf. And I bought, No One Here Gets Out Alive, that now, the book. I bought Morrison's Book of Poetry, The Lords and New Creatures. I bought everything I could get my hands on. And that passion kind of subsided, as I got older, although I'm still just as passionate about their music as I ever was. So, earlier this year, when I came across the graphic novel Morrison Hotel, I was intrigued enough by it that old passion for collecting Doors memorabilia kicked back in. And I got introduced to this because I belong to the Doors official Facebook group, and this was promoted on there. And I checked it out, and I thought, this is just intriguing enough that I'm going to drop 20 bucks and get this. So, I went to Amazon and had it delivered. And it's been a delight to go through. And let me give you a little background about this book. Leah Moore is from Great Britain, and she, like me, is a Doors true believer. And she got turned on to their music through the 1987 vampire movie Lost Boys. And in the soundtrack to that movie, there's a cover of Strange Days by Echo and the Bunnymen. And Leah writes that, relates that she loved that movie, liked the soundtrack, and went to check out the original version of Strange Days and got hooked on the Doors, and has been a fan ever since, even to the point that one of her classes took a field trip to Paris. And while she was there, she convinced the entire class to take a side trip down to Jim Morrison's gravesite there in Paris. So like I say, she's a true believer. And in 2020, she got the idea of coming up with this graphic novel to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the release of the Morrison Hotel album. And it's an album that she describes as the Doors revitalizing themselves, coming back to their roots, and finding themselves again. And she sets the book in 1969, which was the year that the album was actually laid down in the studio. And she has a combination in this book of fact and fantasy. And the book was done in collaboration with Robbie Krieger and John Dinsmore, excuse me, I'm tongue-tied this morning, and the two surviving members of Doors. In fact, Robbie Krieger has written a foreword to the book. And they shared information with her and communicated back and forth with her when she was putting the book together. And it is, as Scott told you, a comic book, okay? What we today know more euphemistically as a graphic novel. So we've elevated the comic book form up to that. But it's a comic book. But it's relatively well written. It's kind of a delight to read. And you can actually learn some stuff about the Doors and about what was going on in this country in 1969 if you read this. And it appears to be very well researched. And anyway, she starts out the book with a couple guys, and one of them is introducing his friend to the music of Morrison Hotel. And his friend says, "Yeah, I think maybe I've heard this on streaming." And his friend goes, "You haven't experienced it. You've got to listen to this on vinyl." So he starts playing the vinyl record for his friend and telling him listening to it this way is going to give you the feeling for what these people did in the studio, what they were trying to say. It's going to take you on a trip back. So then we swirl in our time machine back to 1969. And the book covers pivotal events in the history of the Doors from 1969. It starts out with them being in the studio, recording the title song, Morrison Hotel, the energy, the spirit, the fun they're having in the studio. Then it goes back to the Dinner Key Auditorium concert in Miami in 1969 that ultimately leads to Morrison's arrest and all of the problems that created for the band later on in the year. Then we segue into chapters, and each chapter is identified with a song off of the album. Some of the songs are actually relating to true events in the Doors' history. Other songs are used to illustrate pivotal events in 1969. Like Waiting for the Sun, in the chapter dealing with that song, we have Morrison whisked off to another world by the sun god Apollo, where he gets to mingle with various philosophers and poets like Dylan Thomas, Sophocles, things like that. He then encounters Dionysus, the god of wine. He has to flee from a group of succubi who want to devour his soul. He comes to the River Charon and the ferryman who's taking him across the river Styx. He's tempted to drink from the waters of oblivion. Finally winds up out from the netherworld on the beach, waiting for the sun. That segment's a little hippie trippy, but it's still pretty cool if you think about some of the influences and philosophies, of Jim Morrison's life. The book also has another section that details the Doors appearing at the Toronto Rock and Roll Festival later in 1969, where John Lennon made his solo debut performance, and they had all of the classic rock acts, from the 1950s performing there. And it has the Doors. And that particular section relates back to the song Queen of the Highway. And apparently there was an incident where the Hells Angels were brought in to kind of serve as security and escorts. So the Hells Angels show up to escort the motorcade for the Doors to the concert, which kind of freaks them out. So that's where they get the Queen of the Highway connection. Another section of the book has the Doors coming to the Aquarius Theater in Los Angeles in 1969, to where they do several performances. Some of those performances wound up on the Absolutely Live album. And then the last part of the book, dealing with the history of the Doors, has them out with photographer Henry Diltz to actually photograph that iconic cover album there at the actual real Morrison Hotel building. So covers a lot of pivotal events for the band from that year. Some of the other songs are used to illustrate stories. And Land Ho tells the story of a young man who joins the U.S. Navy, winds up serving on river patrol boats in Vietnam, goes through the horrors of combat, comes back home, marries his high school sweetheart, but his life and his marriage, spiral into tragedy because he's suffering from the PTSD of the war. The Spy, that song is used to illustrate a chapter dealing with a husband and wife whose marriage falls apart because they wind up suspecting each other of adultery and wind up ruining their marriage because of these suspicions, even though they're unfounded. Um, Another section, another chapter is highlighted by Peace Frog, and it details the protests and the violence that erupted in Berkeley, California in 1969 around what was called People's Park, which was a dilapidated parking lot there on the University of California campus that people took over and turned into a community park. And the reaction from the university and the government in California at the time went way over the top. They sent police in, National Guard. Riots broke out. There was police brutality. Governor Ronald Reagan at the time sanctioned the violence, and it was even quoted as saying that if the bloodbath is going to begin, let it be here and now. The police were accused of violence against innocent protesters and such. And the sheriff at the time is quoted in the book as saying that, well, a lot of my deputies had just returned from Vietnam, so they probably saw these people as Viet Cong. So anyway, so there's an interesting chapter in there that deals with that. So Leah Moore says that what she wanted to do was not only commemorate the creation of the Morrison Hotel album, but also look at these pivotal events that occurred in 1969 that that shaped the music and the thoughts and everything behind the album. So, if you are a casual Doors fan, is the book going to do much for you? Maybe not. But, if you are a true believer, if you're really interested in their music, if you know something about the band, and if you were interested in that era of U.S. history, or maybe if you lived through it, I think you're going to find this book a neat thing to add to your collection. It's a fairly easy read, but like I say, it does appear to be fairly well researched. And I learned some things about the Doors that I didn't know, and I believe that she did do her homework, when she put this book together. She wrote the book, but each chapter in it, has a different comic book artist doing the drawing. And so anyway, it's an interesting little book. Like I say, if you want to add to your Doors collection, I would recommend picking it up. It's an easy read, and it's kind of fun, and I think you might actually even learn something from it. So that's my take on the Morrison Hotel graphic novel.
It seems to be widely available. I checked around. I did a Google search on it, and it's easy to find. It's easy to find it everywhere. I don't know. Was this ever put? Do you know, Bob? Was this ever made part of like the like a Morrison Hotel box set or anything like that?
I don't believe it ever was.
Okay, so this has always just been a separate product. But,
yes, as far as I know, and
yeah.
I did see promotions on the 50th anniversary edition of Morrison Hotel album, and I never saw it linked with it. Something that you could buy together.
Got it. And I see that this is only in print. There's no ebook available on this, according to Google Books, but it is available at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Books A Million, IndieBound, and others, I guess. Sounds interesting.
Yeah, it actually was, and I learned a few things. I didn't, I never had really paid attention and didn't know that the parts of Absolutely Live came from that Aquarius Theater concert, and that Aquarius Theater, I guess, was where the musical Hair was either originally staged or created, and so I learned a few things there, and I'm assuming this is accurate, but after the disastrous Miami concert, there's a section of the book where the Doors are getting together, and they're talking about the financial hit that they took out from that because they lost a lot of their concert bookings, and they're figuring out how they can try to pay for stuff. And Jim Morrison is very contrite with his band members, and he's apologizing to them, and says, "I'll try to make this right and get things sorted out, guys." And that was a sentiment that I didn't know had existed. So like I say, I did learn a few things, and the placing some of the songs in the context of the things going on at the time in 1969, kind of helps you understand some of the meaning behind the songs. And I was like the People's Park protests and such. I was aware of People's Park, but I didn't know as much of the detailed history of that. And I was kind of shocked to see Ronald Reagan's comments about, condoning the violence against the protesters. And it talks about how school children were locked inside their buildings by the police, and how elementary schools suffered from tear gas and lots of other things. And so I actually, and that quote, where the sheriff was condoning his deputies because they thought they were dealing with Viet Cong, and Reagan's comments about the bloodbath, I actually researched those, and they're accurate. Those actually were said, so historically.
So you did a little spot fact checking on.
Yes, I did.
Okay, good.
At least on that segment, she's got her
Yeah.
facts together. They were, and so, when I was reading, when I verified the things that Ronald Reagan said, I flashed forward to, trying to avoid new politics, but I flashed to our most recent president, and some of the things that he has said. So I saw where his predecessor came from. So yeah, I did do some fact checks on it, and she appears to be factually correct in the stuff that she's put in there. And in one interview that I read with her, she talks about all of the interaction she had with Krieger and Dinsmore. And, she's like when she talked about the photo session for the Morrison Hotel cover, and all of the information that they sent her and pictures and everything that they emailed to her. So, like I say, she has their blessing on the book. And, as I mentioned earlier, Robbie Krieger wrote a foreword to it. And so he says,
do we know what kind of interaction that John Densmore had with it, or is it mostly just Krieger writing forward?
Apparently, it's both of them. And what she said in one interview, I don't know if she necessarily sat down and talked to them personally, but she does talk about all of the email and texting interactions they had, and about how the two of them sent her all the information about the photo shoot.
So at the very least, Krieger wrote a forward, as he said, but at the very least, Densmore gave his blessing and his
yes,
and has endorsed it. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
Both of them were involved.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's good to hear about Densmore, because
because one of the questions in the interview I read with her, she was asked, "Did you get to spend time with Krieger and Densmore and hit them up for stories?" She said, "Not in that way, no, but I got to send questions, and they gave me access to an incredible archive of pictures and information."
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. So she communicated with both of them.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So check this out. It looks interesting. It looks very.
It actually was. Yeah, and like I say, I bought it in the spirit of that old collecting thing from back in the day when I was young, and I'm glad I did. It was $20 that I think that was spent well, and it's now on my shelf of some of that old Doors memorabilia.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for that
You're
review.
welcome.
And hey, happy holidays, everybody. This is going to be posted. I believe I have this scheduled for New Year's Eve. So this will be our last Geezerology video for 2021. Mm-hmm. And we'll be back in 2022 with some good stuff. I'm coming up. I'm getting ready to do a review of a 50-year-old Country Joe McDonald live album. So that'll be coming up sometime in January. We're going to look at Joe Jackson's Look Sharp. We're going to look at debut albums from Creedence Clearwater Revival, Jimi Hendrix Experience, and the band. The band is the other one. So we're going to do those three, and we'll come back at the end of the month with another panel discussion with Marissa. We're planning on something Doors related for all those Doors fans that are finding us because of our Doors videos. Those seem to be the one that's drawing some attention. Well, we got more coming. We're either going to do a panel discussion of Absolutely Live, or we have something that we're working on with Marissa where she's going through the entire Doors discography, and if it works out, we're going to ask her to just give us our impressions of spending a month with the Doors discography. So that would be interesting if she's ready to do it. So anyway, that's all coming up with January. Keep checking us out. Subscribe to us so you'll know whenever we release something new. And happy 2022, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Same from me. And here's hoping that 2022 is better than the last 2 years we've been through.
Exactly. You got to think that we got nowhere to go but up, right?
Let's hope so.
Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Take care.